Welcome to Beyond the Game, where mental wellness competes. I'm your host, Phillip, licensed clinical social worker, LCSW. I spent over 2 decades working in mental and behavioral health, sitting with families, athletes, and young people in some of the hardest moments of their lives. Over time, one pattern became impossible to ignore. The athletes who looked the strongest on the outside were often carrying the heaviest pressure on the inside. I kept meeting high performers who knew how to train their bodies, knew how to push through pain, knew how to fight for a starting spot or a scholarship, but no one had ever taught them how to process loss, identity shifts, injury, burnout, or the silence that comes when their playing careers end. That gap is what led me to create Copious Life Sports Initiative, or CLSI. Our mission is to close what we call the resilience gap. That is the space between pushing through and breaking down, where too many athletes get stranded. This podcast exists because the conversation around athlete mental health needs more than headlines. It needs stories, real stories from athletes who lived it, coaches who saw it, parents who felt it, journalists who covered it, professionals working to change the system. Because athletes are not just performers, they're people. Here, we talk about the pressure behind the performance, the identity behind the jersey, the silence behind the success. My hope is that every episode helps athletes feel less alone, helps families feel more equipped, helps coaches and leaders rethink what it really means to support the whole athlete. This is Beyond the Game, and I'm really glad you're here. Welcome to CLSI Beyond the Game podcast. Today's guest is someone operating at the highest level of sport, but whose work goes far beyond performance. Johan Martinez-Khalilian is an internationally recognized mental performance coach working with elite athletes, coaches, and organizations across MLB, NBA, and NHL. But his story does not start in pro locker rooms or high performance facilities. It starts in Chicago's as what he calls a Persian Rican kid from the hood. Raised in a Puerto Rican and Persian household, Johan grew up learning how to read people before he fully understood himself. That curiosity, what drives us, what breaks us, and what actually creates change became the foundation of his life's work. What began as speaking and motivation evolved into something deeper. Johan realized that inspiration fades, but transformation requires understanding the inner game. That realization led him into the worlds of psychology, ontology, and human behavior, and ultimately to building his coaching firm, Development, which focuses on developing people from the inside out. Today, Johan works with some of the highest performers in the world, not just to help them win, but to help them align. Because as he has seen over and over, performance without alignment eventually collapses. His work lives in a powerful tension between confidence and identity, between results and reality, and between mental performance coaching and deeper mental health challenges that often sit just beneath the surface. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to have that conversation. Johan, thank you for joining us. Happy to have you here.
Yeah, it's good to be here. And you nailed my name. So just so you know, you did it well. You did it really well.
Awesome. Appreciate you, man. So Persian Rican growing up in Chicago, man. Tell me a little bit about that early life, and what about that early life kind of helped shape who you are today?
I mean, a lot of people know about Chicago, and I feel like Chicago has a pretty bad reputation. But I would say where I grew up, it really shaped me in the best of ways. And even though it wasn't the greatest environment in the world,
right,
some of that struggle really, really shaped me. So I grew up in Humboldt Park, Chicago, predominantly a Puerto Rican area, kind of rough and tumble, a lot of gangs, a lot of violence. When I go speak, sometimes I'm like, has anybody ever been to Disneyland? And it's like the complete opposite of Disneyland. That's where I grew up, And one of the pictures that I like to paint actually is when I was in 8th grade, my 8th grade teacher came in and she essentially wanted to give us like a motivational speech.
Right.
And she walked in and she basically said, some of you guys in here are going to be in a gang before 18. Some of you young ladies are going to get pregnant and drop out of high school. Some of you will be in jail before you're 18. And then there'll be some of you that are shot and killed before 18. And I remember I'm like, this is one of our leaders,
Right.
who has a job to kind of paint a future for us. And, what I didn't have words for in that moment was she was coming in and she was giving us a dose of reality.
Yeah.
But we already lived that, right? As little kids who were in the neighborhood consistently, we didn't need to have somebody tell us what we already knew.
Right.
We needed somebody to come in there and say, hey, I know what y'all have grown up in, but guess what? There's more that's possible. And maybe like paint us a picture of a future that we couldn't imagine on our own. So, that's some of what I experienced growing up. And as a result, that's one of these moments that for me was very formative that helped shape, hey, when I have an opportunity to use my voice, I'm going to actually use it to propel people into an optimistic future.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. And I think that's what we're called to do, right? Is to give people hope and a vision and a pathway to what their dreams are, where they want to be, right? No one wants to be in kind of that reality. No one woke up and said, hey, I want to live in reality where I might not make it to 18, right? You watch
Yeah.
TV, that's what sports can be to us, a dream of, because it's something that we can see day in and day out. So a lot of kids in the inner city see that as a way out, but we need to be able to give that hope that, hey, here's a way, not just hope, but a strategy and a pathway and a plan to get there, so you don't just get lost in that mix, which I'm sure a lot of kids that you grew up with probably just did get lost in the neighborhood and what was going on.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
absolutely. I mean, because what I believe is if you don't disrupt the past, it will repeat.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's the part that leaders play, right? It's like, let's disrupt this past that's not working. And again, I didn't know it at the time because I was so young, but now one of the tools that I use when I work with people is creating vision. It's like, hey, what do you want?
Right.
What's the dream? And even for people who have accomplished big and amazing things, it's tempting to stop dreaming. It's tempting to stop going after the next level, not because you have to prove something, but because it's challenging you to expand your capacity.
Yeah. And I mean, it's both of them. And I've had, several conversations with athletes about this too. It's not just expanding your capacity and setting a new dream or a new stat or a new goal. It's also, who are you outside of sports, right? What are you dreaming
Yeah,
about off the field? What are you trying to bring to life and reality? Because sports is going to end at some point, right? So don't just dream, because Tom Brady said it. He's like, I won all these rings, but I'm still like, what's next, right? Like you have to plan for both of those worlds. You want to be at the top of your game, whatever you're doing, but what are you also planning for off the field, right? Who are you outside
yeah.
of?
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, when I ask the dream question, it's interesting because I think for most of us, we go to professional for dreams instead of what's your dream when it comes to being a father? What's your vision when it comes to being a husband or a wife? Or, what's your vision when it comes to just being a good sister, being a great brother? We don't think in those terms usually, but
Right.
that's where I like to play as well. And that's part of the identity conversation. It's like, who are you in and out of the game?
Right. Both of those. And so you coined the term. I would say you coined it because I never heard it before, the Persian Rican. And so that is a
Yeah.
unique combination. That's two very distinct and proud cultures. How did those kind of show up and play a role in kind of shaping who you are? And it also depends on which one was Persian and which one was Puerto Rican, your mom and your
That's right.
dad.
That's right.
It does come to play. But man, how did that show up and shape and impact you, those two rich cultures?
How much time we got?
Got all the time you need, man.
So, it's an interesting question because I would say this to begin us off in this piece of it. I grew up in a Puerto Rican neighborhood. So my father is Persian, born and raised in Iran, came to America in his early 20s. My mom born and raised in Chicago. Her parents were born in Puerto Rico. So I grew up in a Puerto Rican neighborhood, predominantly around my Puerto Rican family.
Hmm.
So I tend to lean towards the Puerto Rican side. Now, mind you, too, when I was growing up in 80s, I'm 46. I'm an old ass man right about now.
We're about the same age,
But
man.
in
Chill
that,
out.
yeah, but in that, I like to tell folks it was a different era where your culture wasn't put on Front Street back then. Like my parents grew up in a time where they were actually trying to assimilate and kind of blend in. So whereas now it's like your ethnicity, your culture, you put it out there and you're proud of it. I don't speak fluent Spanish. I speak kind of like broken Spanish because my mom wanted me to speak predominantly English.
Right.
I remember with my father, so this is another story on my dad's side. My mom's family would kind of poke fun at him. There was a wrestler in the WWF at the time. His name was Iron Sheik, and they would say, "Hey, they would basically call him, what's up, Iron Sheik?" And
Right.
then they would ask him like, what camel did you ride in on today? And this is from my mom's family, so I grew up with this very interesting, like, what does it mean to be Puerto Rican? What does it mean to be Persian? I would go to Puerto Rico and they would be like, well, you're from the States, so you're not really Puerto Rican. So it was
Right.
this like identity thing from the beginning of my life where I felt like I don't know how to make sense of being both. And I also had parents who were kind of like trying to hide it. And then I saw the external world making fun of it.
Right.
So in the beginning, I really wanted to be Puerto Rican because I was in a Puerto Rican neighborhood. So I was just like, well, I'm more Puerto Rican than Persian.
Right.
But I could sense some of that like fear.
Right.
And as I got older, it was me saying, hey, I want to know what it means to be both, but that has to begin with creating belonging inside of myself instead of waiting for the world to accept me.
Hmm. Yeah.
And, I'm giving you kind of like the shorter version of like I said, when I started, I'm
Right.
like, there's so much I could say about this,
Right.
but it's been this long journey of like self-acceptance when it comes to my ethnicity and a culture that for the most part hasn't accepted what it means to be both.
Right.
And even now, America's at war with Iran.
Right. Kind of where do I exist in this? And I think in a lot of ways, good most of the time, bad sometimes, sports can be that equalizer, right? Because it's not about, look, no one cares where you're from if you go out on the court and you put up 20.
Yeah.
If you can put the ball in the hoop, no one cares, right? So you grew up in Chicago during the Magic era where Jordan was doing his thing, and I know you work with elite athletes now. So how did sports kind of shape you? What role did they play for you growing up?
Yeah. So I always like to say that basketball saved my life. I grew up in Chicago during the Jordan era.
Right.
So it was a very, very special time. I grew up, so I'm a bit of a sneaker freak myself too.
Yeah.
And like the Jordans were coming out for the first time and I was wearing them to play basketball. Soccer was actually my first sport because my father played professional soccer in Iran.
Nice.
Um, and he actually tried to push it a little too hard. That's why I shifted to basketball.
Yeah.
And as you can imagine, if you were a kid playing soccer in Chicago at that time versus a kid playing basketball at that time, like that would play a significant role in how many friends you had and what type of friends you had. I'll share this because again, so many different stories that are formative.
Right.
But I remember had to be like 12 or 13 years old, and there was a basketball court that I would play at all the time, just like walking distance from my house. And the gang in my area was called the Cobras. So I remember, one day I'm just hooping, I'm just by myself, and one of the dudes comes up who's part of the Cobras, and he's like, "Yo, like, what's up? Do you want to be down with us? Do you want to be a Cobra?" And I'm like, "Man, to be honest with you, I just want to hoop, man. I just want to play ball."
Yeah.
And this is where if you remember like the after school special thing
Yeah.
where they're like, well, we're gonna beat you up until you join the gang, or
Right. Right.
then somebody gets it back at me. And it was just like the complete opposite of that, because he just
Yeah.
basically looked at me and he was like, man, hey, keep doing good in school, keep playing ball, we'll look out for you. You know what I mean? Like, we got your back.
Yeah.
And part of that, for me, one is like I knew what I was about at an early age, because for a lot of my peers, that acceptance and belonging that could come from a gang was kind of tempting.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for me, I loved the game of basketball. I wanted to get as good as I could possibly get. And I knew I had leadership skills in me too.
Right.
And that's part of why I think I was able to, in that moment, just stand up for what I believed in and who I was
Yeah.
in the face of, an opportunity to go down a different path.
Yeah.
And I really believe that's one of the many moments when it comes to basketball that changed my life.
I think that's dope. One of the things that we talk about a lot, and I mentioned it with athletes, is the resilience gap, right? Where that space between kind of push through and break down where we don't have the tools that we need and we can't really figure out how to get to the other sides. And I feel like that impacts athletes in very unique ways. There's so many opportunities where you've just been trained to be a basketball player where the other skills and sides of yourself and the what if, and you're just go, go, go. I want to make it to the league, but what if you don't? Like, what if you don't get there kind of thing? But what you're talking about is not really having a space to fit in. And so what Johan had to
Hmm.
do was figure out who Johan was and like himself and figure that out. And that
Yeah.
was basketball. That's what I'm doing versus I'm lost, so I'm just gonna cling to anything that kind of helps me out along the way. So I think that's a dope moment where probably some of those early childhood not fitting in, being in the community, figuring things out, it was like I got to figure me out, right? I can't figure everything
Yeah.
else around me out. What I can do is figure me out, and I like this. I want to do this. I don't want to do that. And
Hmm.
that kept you out of probably becoming the statistics that were available to become in your neighborhood.
Absolutely. And there was a lot of talented cats that, great hoopers that did the both end of, let me gang bang and then play ball. And then their career, their basketball career gets cut short because of this other side, you
Right.
know? And, there was a dude that I knew just super, super talented. In my mind, I'm like, man, this guy could potentially go to NBA. And before you know it, he was locked up. Because again, like some of it is who's around you. And I'm sure this is stuff that you talk about as well. I think even though we talk about it, we underestimate the power of community. We
Mm.
really, really do. And I don't think most of us artfully select the people around us.
Right. Right. We just kind of fall in with who's around us and kind of get connected and, get lost and in the mix. And depending on neighborhood and lifestyle, man, there's probably a ton of potential NBA champions and all-stars locked up in correctional facilities around the country that nobody knows about. It's the
It's
difference,
wild.
the one guy that makes it and the one guy that doesn't. It really could be that community and the support that you have in the environment.
Absolutely. I mean, and everything from, yeah, you're going to get into trouble, gang, drug stuff. But also, if you think about character, even if it's just like somebody's arrogance, or the lack of willingness to take feedback, it's like you don't have to go down that dark side of life to just have a skewed piece of character that doesn't allow you to keep growing. And if you had the right people in your life, they could sit with you and say, hey, your arrogance will hold you back from the next level,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
you
Humility
know?
will play a massive role in the opportunities that you have. And there's that fine line that I don't think a lot of pro athletes, a lot of young athletes, or a lot of people recognize. Talent and performance can only get you so far before character will catch up to you, right? You see it all the time in the NFL. There are guys that they are willing to keep on rosters, and in the NBA, willing to keep on rosters because of how well they can perform. Once that performance starts to dip, I'm not dealing with all the nonsense that comes with that. I'm not dealing with everything else that you're going to bring to the table. And that's life in general. Whether you're working at a company or trying to get into a league, character counts. Character matters. How you show up matters, right? How you're able
Yeah.
to kind of follow the leader or be the leader matters. The quality of leadership you bring to the table, all of that matters, right? And you think, well, I'm good enough, I could just do what I want. Yeah, that's going to run out because people don't want to deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating because, especially if you look at the NBA, I think for a while, the player run league was a thing that people were, all right, it's a player run league now.
Right.
But then again, the character component and the misalignment between like ownership and players and coaches, it became kind of a hot mess.
Yeah.
So it's like if you're going to have a winning culture, sure, you can have players that lead, you can have coaches that lead, the front office that leads. But what does it look like for everybody to get on the same page around some sort of moral framework, or some sort of framework where it's like we're going to be committed to integrity. We're going to be committed to habits that actually work for everybody instead of letting one person run the show.
Yeah, we had our second episode was with former NFL player Heath Evans, and he talked about kind of his career beforehand and then his career when he got to the Patriots. And that Patriot way permeated that entire building every player. And he talked about now some of that same stuff from the Patriot way infuses how he lives his life now. But it was that one team focused around one goal, kind of one mission, everybody playing their part, doing their job, working hard and putting in the work. And that shapes, when you want championships, that's what it's going to take. You can have the best player on the planet, but if you don't have a culture that can sustain them, I'm from DC, man, like I told you. So I'm a Redskins Commanders fan. I've seen what
I
culture
feel you.
like, and you can bring in all the best players on the planet, but that's not going to change anything.
Yeah.
Like what you guys have going on out in Chicago with Caleb Williams now, right? Like there's a guy at the front that's setting the tone, and you're starting to see the wins come from it. And so it really is kind of what kind of culture and environment are you in? But a lot of that comes from what kind of culture and environment that you come from, right? So you're doing
Right.
performance coaching now, coming from the environment that you came from. How did that transition happen for you? How did that one culture shape you into somebody who's now participating as a leader in one of these other cultures?
For me, it starts with, it goes back to like basketball, right? It's like I fell in love with basketball. And in my mind, that was the first dream that I had. I was like, typical athlete who said, I want to make it to the pros.
Right.
So high school level, my first piece of difficulty was my freshman year, I was 5'2".
Yeah, that's not
So
gonna help.
if you try to hoop, especially Randy, it's like, I know Muggsy Bogues was playing in the league at what, 5'3",
Right.
but I already knew, man, I got to grow. But at the same time, because I was 5'2", I worked on my outside game a ton. So I was like hitting threes from 4 or 5 feet beyond the arc. But then also I was trying to figure out how do I grow. And I remember my freshman year, my PE teacher was like, if you want to grow to your maximum potential, you need to sleep like 8 or 9 hours a night. And I remember after that point, man, it was like a religious dedication of just
Right.
sleeping as much as I could. And before you know it, 5'2" to 5'4", my sophomore year, I was like, okay, something's working. And then I went from 5'4" to 5'11" my sophomore to junior year. So I grew 7 inches over a summer, and then I made varsity. Then I was 6'1" my senior year. I started to get letters to play basketball at different schools in college, which was a dream come true. And I remember I took one of those letters and I took it to my academic counselor, and she read the letter and she looked at me and she said, University of Chicago, that was the school that I wanted to go to. She's like, it's one of the best schools in the nation when it comes to academics, and you're not smart enough.
Mm,
And so, yeah, so I remember, I'm like
dang.
sitting in that room, just kind of feeling the weight of that gut punch, and she went on to just say, you're a good basketball player, but you just can't cut it here. You may want to like think about a different school or whatever. And I remember I just left deflated
Yeah.
because again, it was another one of those moments for me where here's a leader in my life, somebody whose literal job is to like set a path for me and to guide me to some of these dreams that I have. And her approach was realistic.
I get one to be realistic, but at the same time, you got a kid sitting there said, "Hey, I want to do this. I got this letter." How do you help encourage and motivate, even if in your heart of hearts you feel like this is going to be a long shot? How do I give you the tools to make that decision for yourself versus crushing you, right? And I think this is an example of what can happen with a lot of athletes is that coach, that parent, that friend, that person, that leader could come in and instead of helping to set a table for you, work to crush you unintentionally. Like, I don't think she woke up that morning and was like, hey, this is how I want to crush Johan today. But it came
Yeah.
and she wasn't prepared to have the right answer that should have been. Or better yet, for you, she did have the right answer because that did help motivate you.
Well, yeah, and it shifted me in a certain way because this is the thing, right? Is there are certain adults that believe their job is to help kids avoid disappointment, and that is not our job as adults. So anytime a kid has a dream, anytime anybody has something that they want to go after, that becomes the fodder for them to work on their character. But we don't. Most of us don't see that in that moment, right? Because it's like, hey, Joe, you want to play here? It's gonna take dedication. It's gonna take commitment. It's gonna take a little bit of extra.
Right.
Are you willing to sacrifice to get the thing that you want?
Yeah. Are you willing to sleep the 8 to 9 hours a night? And as a teenage kid,
Right.
doing that on your own, that motivation, That's gonna work. There's a great book. The name of the author is escaping me, but it's The Blessing of the Skin Knee, right? When things don't go right, when things don't go well, and that's part of what you see is parents trying to protect their kids from the hard and the challenging, but that's what shapes them. You are who you are today, probably because of some of the struggles that your parents came here coming from other countries to figure it out. They instilled some of that in you. I used to work in-home private wraparound services, my own company working with families. And this dad was like, yeah, I've given my son everything. I've given him, a $20,000 gym in the basement that he could work out in. I've given him everything. Why isn't he having the same type of success that I had? It was like, dude, you know how many hard lessons you had to figure out going from lower middle class to now having the wealth and income to afford these things? Like all of
Yeah.
that made you who you are. You can't just give that to somebody. That comes
Mm-mm.
through the hard work, the hard lessons, the challenges, the skinning the knee, the bumping your head, the figuring it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, like I said, I had these pivotal moments where instead of people saying, do you want to step into the crucible? They would rather be realistic. Now, as a result of that, I left that room and I kind of threw away that piece of paper that said, we want you to go to University of Chicago. And I ended up going to Northeastern Illinois University. And the first year I said, well, maybe I need to prove it to myself that I can be a good student. And, it's not that I was a bad student. I just knew that academics wasn't like what I was excited about. It was
Right.
definitely basketball. So I did the extra work. I got tutors and I worked extra hard and I made the honor roll my first year of college. So after that, I'm like, okay, I'm going to try out for the team. I get an email a couple months later that says Northeastern is going to only be an academic institution and we're going to basically get rid of all our sports programs.
No.
So, at this point, again, I'm faced with this crossroads where somebody tells me, well, if you transfer, you'll basically lose like half of your credits. And then you'll have to be a freshman again in college. And then also they, started telling me the financial implications of it. And my parents were paying for my school at the time. So I was like, man, probably not going to the NBA. So in my mind, even though again, playing college ball was the first, that next level dream for me when it comes to basketball. But I was like, all right, let me just focus on academics and, do my thing and get my degree. Now, I kept playing in rec leagues all over the place. And when I was playing in rec leagues, my game's getting better. And I remember people would come up to me and be like, where you play college ball? And I always had that thing in me to be like, ooh, well, I
Yeah.
don't, you know? And then I remember I hit 25 and for some reason, especially in basketball, when you're like 25, 26, you at
Yeah.
your peak, right? So I was like killing in the rec leagues. And I remember somebody was like, man, dude, you should play overseas if you don't already. And I just, in my heart, in that moment, I was just like, man, I'll never know.
Right.
I'll never know what I was capable of.
Right.
Just because that one moment where I allowed someone else to shape the parameters of my life.
Yeah.
And that's where, again, I didn't know it at the time, but I would say that was the beginning of what I now do. And, once I left college, first I was just a motivational speaker where I was like, I'm going to use my voice to help people. So I started traveling the world. First it was in Chicago only, and then I started to travel the nation. Before you know it, I did a TED talk and then I'm like outside of America. I remember one day I'm like in London about to tell my story in London.
Right.
And I'm thinking to myself, how does a kid from the hood make it
Right.
to like another country to basically share and inspire?
Right.
And as time progressed, there was a friend of mine who started a coaching firm and he was the one who recruited me initially. And he's like, I think you'd be a great coach. It'd be a great supplement, for you as a speaker. And I did a training for it. In the beginning, it was just CEOs, but then, it transitioned into more the sports world. And then it was like a full circle moment for me where it's like, oh, I get to be this person wherever you are in your trajectory, in your journey, whether it be as an athlete or as a coach. It's like I get to be this person who can push you past some of your limiting beliefs
Yeah.
and help you accomplish the thing that even you maybe don't think you can accomplish. Because I'm sure you've seen it as well. I think people who think of professional athletes think they're the most confident people in the world, and they're humans.
Right.
And they got insecurities and they got fears and they got hangups and they got bad habits. And it goes back to, why we do what we do is they need people in their life who can help them see sometimes what they can't see on their own.
There is a distinction between what you do, kind of the mental performance piece, and what I do, mental health, but there is a unique synergy there. And so let's have that conversation, right?
Sure.
What do you see as the lane that you're in, and then that lane for mental health? How do they connect? How do they coincide? What is that relationship from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I like to use the distinction of mental health and mental fitness. So I would say that's the coaching lane is the mental fitness part of it, right? So I think sometimes I'm actually inviting people into stress. Whereas I think from a mental health standpoint, you're like helping them navigate away from stress.
Right,
It's like, let's create stressors that help expand you so that you can start to discover who you are in the midst of certain stresses.
right,
Now, again, the game provides a ton of stressors. So that's there. But it's part of what you were touching on earlier is for the most part, they're not creating healthy stressors outside of work that then help them reveal how they show up in those moments. And then we can look at it non-judgmentally, right? It's like, okay, let's take a look. Who are you when you don't get what you want, for example? There are moments that pop up where I get to ask that question. Hey, can you describe who you were in that moment? You didn't get what you wanted. Tell me the way that you showed up. So then, for example, maybe we'll pinpoint, they can describe it and say, well, it sounds like you showed up a little entitled.
right.
Now, one, it takes a certain type of person to take that feedback. So that's why I think from a coaching standpoint, you got to be at a certain mental health place to be able to hear in that moment you showed up entitled, right? If you're fragile when it comes to your mental health, we can't have that conversation.
Absolutely.
So I'll pause there, and I want to hear what it looks like you
Yeah,
were
oh,
about to
I
time
think
in.
it makes sense. I think, in some therapy, I'll tell anybody, anybody that's been a client of me, no, I'm creating distress too. I'm pushing against those defense mechanisms because what I want to get to is the heart of it, is why. Where does that come from? What's the origin of that? Can you see how this formed? Can you see how this developed it? How do we reshape that? And then what do we want that to look like, right? And so I think we're creating two different types of distress in one sense, because in some sense, if you're going to athletes, they're looking to perform better, right? And
Yeah,
in a real sense, from the mental health perspective, how is it to live a more healthy life, to show up in a more healthy way for those around you? And I think it sounds like some of what you're doing is you're pointing back to that identity piece as well. We're
yeah,
just doing it from two different angles. And the
yeah.
pursuit is really, for me, my sole intention is not about performance in general, but how can you show up and be a better version of yourself, which is naturally going to lead into performance. And even some of the work that you're doing with performance, it is going to challenge them to look at how they show up in this environment and say, oh, I show up in this environment over here the exact same way, and I want that to be different. And so we're both doing the challenging. It is, what is that end goal? What is that primary focus? And you're a little bit different. Every performance coach doesn't show up isn't like you. Some of it's just performance, performance, performance. But I think where we're aligned and where we're the same is we care about the person that's underneath. And if you
Yeah,
care about the person that's underneath and want a good positive outcome for what's underneath, that in and of itself is a mentally healthy approach to interacting with anyone, right? There's a
100%.
from that, regardless of who you are, what your profession is, and what the title is. I care about the person that's underneath. And you get that sometimes with actual coaches when you're playing. You have coaches that care about the
Yeah,
athlete, the guys that have talked about that. Sometimes you get that from parents, right? Sometimes you don't get that from parents. Sometimes you get that from teammates. But when you're dealing with somebody that genuinely cares about the betterment of the person underneath, I think you see different results. And I think those are the ones that last a lifetime.
that's exactly it. I mean, because I always like to say the person is the curriculum.
Yep.
So I don't trust a mental performance coach who has a 10-step process because it's like, just do these 10 things and you'll be good. I don't think that's true at all. Because every single person is different. And it goes back to what you were saying is like, if first I know how to sit with you and be with you and listen to you and then learn who you are, then we can build a map for what may work for you, because then we want to keep getting feedback. Hey, what's working? What's not working?
Right.
You know, because essentially I think at the core of my work, it really is about integrity, but not in the sense that most people talk about. Because I think we've all moralized integrity to be like, integrity is, are you a good or a bad person? Like, what do you do when nobody's looking? And even though that's great, for me, integrity is more about, do you do what you say you're going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And are you who you say you are?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Are you living an integrated life?
Right.
Is your mind, your body, your heart, and your spirit working together, or are they disconnected and disjointed? So a lot of the inquiry that I use, is to help see that. Oh wow, like my mind disconnects from my body quite a bit, and that's part of why I'm a little out of whack when it comes to my sports, because I don't know when that's happening. One, which is an awareness conversation. And then if I start to notice that it's happening, I don't know how to get them on the same page.
Yeah. Yeah, how to keep them alive. We had a athlete played at the University of Maryland, Travis Garrison. He was on the podcast a couple episodes ago, and he talked about how when he got to University of Maryland, he got into drinking, going out, partying, and everything else, and he would be depressed the day after, and how disconnected he was from himself that he doesn't even remember his playing time there, right? And so we can go and have that conversation from a mental health perspective. What I immediately realize is that that's social anxiety. And it probably showed up long before you got here. And he talked about, yeah, how sometimes growing up that was here too. And so now that we have kind of some of that framework and terminology, how do we deal with it? Right? Because you not dealing with it got you to the point where you were so disconnected from yourself. You don't remember a tremendous playing career at a top basketball school in the country. How do
Yeah.
we fix that? And then how does that show up in your adult life, and how are you navigating so that you can stay connected, stay grounded? And talked about his organization that he's working with now, but that's from a mental health perspective, putting some of that language around it so people can understand what they're thinking and feeling and what's going on. And so maybe, we're coming at it from two different angles, and we're using some different language over here than you
Hmm.
might be using over there, right? So, optimization, focus, confidence, some of those things over there where we're looking at kind of healing, anxiety, trauma, which is going to be really complex and really
Yeah.
impact performance in unique ways. And so instead of there being this hard and fast line in that you only need a mental performance coach or you only need mental health support, it is how do you develop and have that relationship with somebody that cares about you? Now, how do we have the conversation? And as we're having the conversation, how does your history play a role in that? And what do we do with that history as we see it? And am I showing up in every environment that I want to be the way that I want to be? You see it all the time with athletes that are going out performing and doing great on the field, but over here they're having an abusive relationship, can't maintain a relationship, and everything else. You're not the same guy.
Right.
How's that feel? Does that feel okay to you that you're not able to be the same guy? How do we get you to that point, right? What work do you need, or what was the trauma that you experienced growing up that makes this okay here, but then you're someplace else different? And so it is the way we're having the conversations and what we're having, but we're still fundamentally it's the person that's underneath that we're caring for.
Absolutely. Have you read the three laws of performance?
Not yet.
So I would suggest that some of the frameworks that I use from a coaching standpoint are in that book. And the first law essentially is everyone behaves according to how the world occurs to them, right?
Mhm.
So, which I'm sure you can kind of piece together, is the problem there is most of us think our occurrence or our perception is reality.
Right.
You can see a lot of that in sports.
Right.
Some of what I get to do is help people separate their experience from what's really happening.
Yeah.
The facts from the fiction.
Yeah.
And the more they can do that, they can level set to show up at their best.
That sounds like a lot. I'm in this area and I call it Bethesda dad syndrome, where you have these guys that go out and make millions of dollars for their family, but can't figure out a way to maintain their marriage, their relationship, and be with their kids. And it's like, hey, some of the stuff that makes you great at work or great on the court isn't necessarily the same stuff that's going to work when you're at home in your private relationships. It's not going to be the exact same way. So how do you figure out how to balance and show up in a way that's consistent, that's going to care for both the people at work while you're going and you're doing the thing that you're doing at the office or on the court, right? How do you establish that guy? Because you can't just be that one athlete, go, 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 do it my way, do it now, when you're in those close intimate relationships and when you have kids and work. You could burn your kids out. Your dad kind of, pushing you with soccer. It was like, well, we're just
Yeah.
gonna walk away from soccer, you know.
Right. Well, and I would say that's another component. So leadership development is another part of the work that I get to do with folks, right? It's like, okay, what does it mean to be a leader? Do you believe yourself to be a leader? And to me, even what you just broke down there, it's like, okay, if you're a father, and then I asked him, like, do you want to lead as a dad? Do you want to lead as a husband? And most people don't ever confront that, right? It's just kind of like I have a title, and therefore what I'm doing is I'm repeating what I saw,
Mm-hmm.
or I couldn't stand what I saw so much that I'm doing the exact opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, and again, this is what I think is really crucial in my work. It's creating a vision for leadership, creating a vision for fatherhood.
Yep.
Because, I like to say that part of my work as a coach is building the future from the future,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, all right, you're not that guy yet,
Right.
but what does it look like to let that guy start to lead now?
Yeah.
How would he show up? How would he speak to your kids? And then the moment you use your imagination in that way, and that's part of the third law of performance, as you know, we start to shift because we're letting the future version of ourself show up and set the table instead of the past version of ourself. That could be a little bit more problematic, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, I mean, it's creating a version of ourselves. There's a lot of guys that do a lot of couples work. There's a lot of guys that think I am the leader because I am the man, so I am the leader and I'm leading well. And it's like, you're not, because none of this is what leadership should look like. And then on the other side, sometimes I see athletes put in the position to be the leader of the team because they're the top scorer or the best. And they're not. That's not their build, and they don't lead in those ways. And so that leadership component is important. What does that actually mean? And more importantly, almost, what doesn't it mean? Right? What's not a part of leadership? Leadership isn't about just telling people what to do. If that's what it was, then that'd be a whole lot easier. You have to be
Yeah.
able to get people that want to follow you. So you have to build and develop a culture. You have to be the type of person that folks want to gravitate to. And it's not just a title. It's not just a position. It has to be a part of who you are. Right?
Yeah. And well, if you're a leader, first it starts with how do you lead yourself? Because maybe you don't even have a picture of that.
Yeah.
So some people, like when you ask them, are you a leader? They'll actually be like, no, I don't think I'm a leader. And I'm like, well, at the very least, you're called to lead yourself. Because
Right.
if you're not leading yourself, I mean, good luck performing at a high level. You can't even do that yourself. So let's just stop right now.
Right.
So,
Right.
so once you invite them into just seeing it that way to say, okay, now how much do you want to grow your leadership?
Right.
So, I got a guy that right now is injured, and it's a great opportunity to talk about, well, how do you expand your value? Because if your value is only while you're playing, you're very limited. Because that's some of what I'm doing too, right? Is I'm helping people see the limitations of their mindset. And usually we play in a very small sandbox instead of saying, okay, if I'm going to be a professional athlete, but I'm only interested in how I play, if that's the only place where my value comes from, I could be easily replaced. But if my play isn't the end of it, if it is my influence, if it is my leadership, if I'm a glue for other people,
Mm.
now I'm a very, very valuable piece of the puzzle that when I'm injured, man, I'm raising my team up. That's a guy that even when your skills may be dwindling at the end of your career, people still want you in the locker room.
Makes me think about Anthony Gill that plays for the Wizards, right? He's on the back end of the bench. He's not going to generate a whole lot of money. He's signing the vet
Mm-hmm.
minimum, low end deals, but he's been on that roster for 4 or 5 years where they're trading everybody else away because of how he shows up with that leadership. You can have a long career being that guy, even if you can't put all the points on the scoreboard. If you can show up and impact a culture in a locker room,
Yeah.
that's life changing. And you've seen that in the NFL too. The quarterback has to be the leader of the team, but if the guy's not a leader, that's not your leader.
No.
You can't make him be one. No one's going to trust him. No one's going to take him seriously. That's square peg, round hole 101 there. It's not going to
Yeah.
work.
Well,
Uh,
and so this is part of what's fascinating too, because I work one-on-one right now with an NBA head coach, and there was a guy that they were considering bringing in. And this was an interesting piece that I hadn't even thought of, where it's like, he's a leader with players, but he always has conflict with coaches. So he's basically like I don't want to bring this guy in because I think he's going to go, get along really, really well with the players, but then cause rifts with us from a coaching staff standpoint, right? So just because, again, you're a leader in one area doesn't mean you know how to lead in multiple arenas, these are skills to develop. I mean,
Yeah.
it makes me think of Chris Paul,
Oh yeah.
which to me it's sad, man. Here's a guy who's obviously, a Hall of Famer, and he communicated, this is my final year.
Mhm.
And then the team that was like basically the most important team in your career cuts you at 3:00 in the morning. That says something about your presence
Yeah.
as even though he has a reputation as a leader, but to me, it's that thing that I'm talking about is like, who are you leading though?
Right.
Are
Right.
you,
Right.
right?
It's a disconnect, and it's hard because you think these guys should be great leaders. He's a point guard, one of the best point guards in history. He should be a leader. When you looked at Michael Jordan, he should be a leader. None of his sons made it to the league, right? And then when he did coaching, that didn't go so well. And he did ownership, that didn't go so well. And so not everybody's cut out to lead the same thing in the same way. He was a leader of himself. Jordan could get himself to do just about anything else. It is not that easy and daggone near impossible to get Michael Jordan out of anybody else. That is
Yeah.
that's not. And if your standard
No.
is being this guy, yeah, he's not going to be great at doing that. He's not going to be able to take the failure or the lack of discipline and everything else. Like, you can't just create that. And so part of this conversation we can get into is what
Yeah.
separates mentally elite athletes from every other athlete. Kind of what have you seen as kind of that differentiator for those mentally elite athletes?
Yeah, I think it's a lot easier than most people would think. Part of it is play. Like, plain and simply, it's a commitment to play. It's a commitment to joy. You can see they're having a blast just because they get to play. It's not stressful.
Mm-hmm.
It's not overwhelming. It is not a weight on their shoulders. They can see it for what it truly is. Like, it's a game,
Right.
and they don't take themselves too seriously in the game.
The best example that I think a lot of people will recognize is Curry in the Olympics. What he did at the end of that, he was a kid on the playground doing something he loved. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't anxious. He was just
Yeah.
I've watched that clip so many times. My son's watched it. It's one of his favorite players. And I'm just like, you want to say that he's in the zone. No, he is in the, I am disconnected from everything else. I am just in my body, enjoying this moment, enjoying this game. He probably didn't even fully realize the scope of what he did until he went back and watched the film. He's like, I'm just in it. I'm just going.
Yep.
This practice. I've done these shots 1,000 times. Let's just go out and do it. And you watch it, and I think that's part of what makes us fall in love with athletes, man. Because I think deep down, we all want to be able to be that free in whatever it is we do. And to watch somebody at the peak of that, just in their moment, watching Tiger Woods back in the day finish the back nine and get to the 18th hole, just watching those moments, they're so powerful. I think part of that is, man, I'd love to be able to do something that I love that easily, that freely, just in the moment with everybody watching. And I just want to be free like that. I think there is a certain freedom and release and relief that people have just watching people perform at their best, because you can watch figure skating, you can see it, you can watch other opportunities and see it, you can watch public speakers get out and just be in those moments. I'm sure you've had those moments where you were just talking and you felt like, hey, I'm in it right now. We're like, this is a moment. If somebody's getting this on camera, it's going to be a moment. I'm just in it right now.
Yeah.
And there's a beauty to that makes people aspire to want to do those things, right? The ease with which somebody passionately performs at a high level is something they love.
Yeah, and part of what that is, right, is it's about authenticity and presence.
Yeah.
So again, you can't teach that.
Right.
You can't force someone to be authentic. You can't force someone to be present. You need to create practices. You need to create awareness. You need to create habits that help somebody figure out, this is what it means to be me.
Right.
And then I know how to truly just be in the moment without trying to control anything.
Yeah.
That's an art form.
Yeah. And that's what makes and kills youth sports these days.
Hmm.
Right? Those parents, I think, in some sense, love watching their kid that they helped to create go out and do something that that kid loves. And that is great. When you watch your kid perform on a court, field, anywhere else, you watch it, that's great. And then it gets into this dark place where now you want it more than a kid. And you pull more out of him. And now this has shifted from something that I just love to something that you're pushing me to do and everything else. And so it starts with they have to love it. And that's that moment, right? You're not watching Michael Jordan. You're watching your own kid go
Yeah.
out, do something, and you know they love the game. And man, it's great. And so, I talk about the car ride home and how parents kill and crush a lot of athletes in that car ride home. I've heard pro athletes talk about those car rides home and kind of how I try to instill in my son, even on the hard days, especially when the games are bad, dude, I just love seeing you play. I love seeing you do what you love to do. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll put in work and we can set it up and do all that stuff. But this isn't about performance. This isn't about wins and losses. You're doing what you love to do. And I love to see. And there's something that's rewarding when you watch someone do something that they love to do. My kids now, right? I'm doing sports and mental health, two things they know that I'm passionate about. Their feedback. Daddy, like I can see it in your energy. I can see when you have a podcast how excited you get. I can see when you're talking to athletes how excited you get. Like it's infectious to be around somebody that's doing it. You can see it in coaches when coaches are doing it. It's just, I think you bring up a great point, man. I think there is a distinction there. Just doing something you love at a high level.
Yeah. Do it. And now here's the thing, because this is where I think people get it mixed up. I'm glad you brought up Steph Curry, because I really believe he was able to create so much from a place of joy, from a place of love, from a place of freedom throughout his career. And as much as I love Mike and I do believe he's my GOAT, I say this from time to time and people were like, what? I actually think he held himself back
Mm-hmm.
because of the energy that he had.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think the revenge mindset that he had, the hard on himself, the hard on everybody else, I think he was actually capable of way more. Part of what you could see, he burnt relationships around him, right? He burnt out multiple times during his playing career.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why? Because it was his fuel.
Yeah.
He had to develop like some sort of like vengeance and enemy and I gotta get you. He wasn't playing from love.
Yeah. No.
Not like Steph. Because again, I see Steph and I'm like, that guy's just light.
Right.
MJ, and again, it's complicated for me because I grew up around him and I was like,
Yeah.
I saw him and I was like, this guy's just like there's nobody like him, which is true. And what if he would have found this different fuel, which
Mm-hmm.
wasn't an anger-based fuel, because I know there's lots of people from the old school is like, no, that's what sports is. You gotta be a killer and you gotta hate your enemy and you gotta like hate your opponent. And I'm like, what if that's not true?
Yeah. What if yeah. I mean, you can see that with LeBron. I think LeBron knows, and study. Yo, buddy's going out here dunking at like 40 something, man. Like
40 something.
if you dunked on the rim right now, your knees would scream at you for a month.
I mean, listen, I'm 46. I played ball this morning actually before we got on, and I'm like, my back hurts right now.
Yeah, but what he's going out doing it's part of it is the love of the game. He don't need the money. Right now, LeBron does not suit up and dive on the court for loose balls for the money. That's not what it is. It's for the love of the game, right? And so
Yeah.
you can see that. And then, when you look at the NBA, there are a lot of guys there that are just there for a paycheck. That are super talented, just raw talent, making millions of dollars, don't love the game. You can see it in their work ethic, but they can still put up 30, 40 points a night. They're just there for a
Yeah.
paycheck. It looks different. It feels different. And it impacts when those championships come too. Because
Yeah.
there's plenty of guys that don't have championship rings because they didn't kind of approach the game the right way. Teams, everything else. I need to be traded. When things aren't perfect, I think the love of the game really shows up, and you can see that in a lot of the greats, but not all of the greats. Some of them are
No.
fooled by. And so I tell people, I was like, it's fascinating that when I'm doing therapy, people end up in one or two places organically and naturally. I want to be the exact opposite of my parents,
Mhm.
or I want to try to be just like them because I think they were great. And I tell everybody, every adult, I was talking to a 62-year-old man about this. that the goal isn't to be just like or absolutely polar opposite. It is what is healthy. I want to be healthy, which now brings me in the middle where I might have some similarities and I might have differences, but I'm going towards the standard of what is healthy. And I think if athletes can get to that place too, how can I do this in a healthy way where it's not just all predicated on, I need somebody to hate, I need another chip on my shoulder, I need something that's going to continue. I think high level competitive, you always have a bit of that. But if that's all of who you are, man, what happens when that career comes to an end?
Yeah, absolutely. And because to me, I would add the authenticity piece because I really believe this to be true is every single human being on earth has something significant in them that nobody else has. And I really believe that part of our job as humans while we're here is to figure out what that is and to contribute it to the world.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
that takes work. Like it's how many conversations does it take? How many mistakes does it take? How many relationships does it take so that you can figure out, I'm really starting to get a glimpse into who I am and what I'm about and what makes me me.
Yeah,
Now, if you can take that thing and you can apply it to your sport, you can apply it to your parenthood, you can apply it to you, that's the magic.
yeah,
But we don't teach that. It's mysterious. So it's like, I hope you get there.
yeah, yeah. That's why we want to push young athletes to really cultivate that identity early on. There are things that you are going to be great. You can be a great athlete and you can be great at non-athlete things as well. There are so many things, so many talents that people have that if all I am is just an athlete, that you can end up really losing yourself in the process. What are some ways that you help athletes detach from their identity being the results of their performance? How do you
Yeah.
help them find that other side of themselves that's not just contingent on, and we tell young athletes this all the time, hey, dude, I don't need you to score 20 points a game. When you get to high school, you're not going to be scoring.
Yeah.
College, I got 20 point a game score. I don't need you to do that. Like, how do you help athletes detach from finding their identity only in the results, only in the scoreboard?
Well, some of it is back to what I was saying earlier. If you look at this first law of performance, we're getting really curious about the meaning that they create in a result, right? The perception or the belief system that's embedded in the result. Now, part of the problem is we live in a world that kind of imposes or tells athletes the result does tell you who you are.
Right, right,
So I invite them into a distinction here, which is, okay, there's a result. That's a big part of sports. You have a choice though. The result can define you or it can inform you. What do you want to choose? Because again, here's the mental skill is to look at the result and let it be data. Let it be information instead of habitually allowing it to tell you who you are.
right. I love that. So what you just said is allowing the results to be data and not identity.
Yeah.
That's that's big. That's our takeaway, folks. No, that's
Pause it right there. But again, but these are skills, right? These are skills that require awareness and intentionality and practice.
yeah,
So first you have to know, oh, wait a minute, I have a choice.
yeah,
It doesn't have to be what's told to me, which is the game didn't go my way, therefore I am a loser or I am a winner because it went hey, what if that's right? It was good, it was bad. That's not real. That's somebody told you that. Okay. So here's the result. What can I learn? How can I grow? What's there for me to get better? It's information, it's data. What can I tweak for next time? What can I keep going? Because I
right,
really like that.
right.
So I actually teach something called Be Do Have. I don't know if you're familiar with that framework.
Familiar. Yep.
So part of what I invite folks into is you get to choose your emotional state. So now if we go from a be do have to be like, okay, let's say you have a win, you have a loss. Right now we'll go to loss. Who do you want to be when you lose? Who are you committed to being? Because you cannot win everything. It's an impossibility.
Right.
So if you look at it and you say, every time you lose, for lack of a better way of saying it, you feel like shit.
Right.
Is that what you want? No one has ever said yes. No one has ever said yes, right?
Right.
So everybody's like, no, I don't want that. Okay, great. So how do you want to show up? Who do you want to be when the outcome is a loss? Well, I'd love to be curious. I'd love to be at peace. Whatever the way of being is, okay, guess what? We get to work on that. So now, if that's who you're committed to being, that's a choice before it's a feeling. So that's part of what I really invite folks into is your agency is primary here in this framework. What does it look like to choose to be this type of person? You're not ignoring your feelings. You're aligning your feelings to your choice and your vision and your commitments and your values. Again, that takes skill. And that's going to be a messy process. It's going to be an imperfect process, but we can keep working on it. We can keep chipping away at it. So who you decide to be actually aligns with this instead of you're on the roller coaster of up and down whenever you win or lose.
Nah, man, that's dope. I think that's really helpful, and hopefully some of the young athletes out here can hear that. Is part of it's making the choice, right? We can just sit in it and be resigned to what we're currently feeling and experience. Is like, no, who do I want to be now? How do I want to attack this after a loss? What do I want to do? And good or bad, Kobe, after missing some shots in the game, would go to 2 in the morning getting shots up, right? I
Yep.
want to make sure that I'm not going to miss the next set of shots. Who do you want to be? And so many athletes I've seen, they have a bad game, they sulk, whatever, then they go home and they hop on 2K and they're playing 2K for the rest of the
Yeah.
day. And they're not training and everything else. It's like, and I tell clients this all the time. You can't be mad at the result if you don't put in the work. If you're not going to put in the work, we can't really have a conversation. Like, we can't be mad at losing when we're
No.
winning things. We have to do winning things if we're going to win. And it doesn't mean we're always going to win, because sometimes we're going to lose. But we can't do losing things and then be mad we don't win. It doesn't
Yeah.
work that way.
Absolutely. Well, even, because I work with a lot of baseball players, in the MLB, and that's a sport where you could do everything right as a hitter
Yep.
and still it not work out.
30%.
Think
30%.
about that, right? If you're 30% as a hitter, you're elite.
Yeah.
So again, if you look at that, but you allow results to dictate your emotional state, your way of being, oh man, good luck in that sport. So that's why I think this work is so crucial, especially in these types of sports like baseball, golf, where it's like, man, the mind can just have its way because you're not getting what you want the majority of the time.
When would you refer an athlete that you're coaching to a therapist? Have you done that? Is that like kind of what's that line for you when you say, hey, man, coaching is going to work here, but you might need a little bit something extra? When do you make that decision?
Well, so once basically it was revolved around, I could see some hints of like some deep trauma work that I don't like. That's not my specialty, right? So if I'm noticing we want to go into the past more often than not my area of expertise,
Right,
right?
right,
If I can tell there's a moment in time that needs to be excavated
right,
in their past, not my area of expertise.
right.
So that's when I'll be like, hey, you may want to see a therapist about X, Y, and Z. And I got a couple people, that I know that are great therapists that I've referred, but now I can add you to the list too.
Yeah, man.
Because it is all about fit too. I think,
Yeah.
when it comes to these types of relationships, it's like, do I connect with the person? Do I vibe with the person? Especially if you're going to go into these deep places from the past
Yeah.
and unearth some of these traumas. So for me, that's the main distinction. If there's some deep trauma work, or if we're spending a lot of time in the past, that's not my area.
Hey, I know we have you
Yeah,
for a little bit of time. I have one last question for you. I have a ton of questions, man. It's been great
sure,
talking.
sure, sure.
I have
We
one
could do it again. We could do it again.
for sure. So just quick behind the scene question. What would surprise the public about your work with elite athletes? What would shock people to know happens behind the scenes when working with these high level athletes?
So I would say this, because this is what shocked me. I thought athletes were going to be the most confident people in the world. I was like, oh man, like, how does this work? Because they're already so confident.
Right.
And it just woke me up to what it means to be human,
Oh man.
because their confidence ebbs and flows. And this is part of why this work is so necessary. And the insecurities are very real. The fears are very real. We put athletes on a pedestal as if they are like these gladiators, when in reality, they're vulnerable people who have the same hopes and dreams and wishes and fears and insecurities that we do. The difference is when they shit the bed on Tuesday, they got to go to work on Wednesday and do it again as if they didn't.
Yeah, with the microphone
And
in their face and social
with
media.
the microphone.
Absolutely.
And that's why I think we view them differently in this world that we live in. But it really woke me up, and it actually I got more inspired because I get to do this work. Because it's like, man, the courage
Mm,
that it takes to keep showing up.
yeah.
But when you don't feel confident today, yet you're going to show up for work. Because I think, again, for us in normal jobs, we can hide. As an athlete, you cannot hide. There's no hiding.
Yeah. Man, that's so powerful. Johan, thank you so much for that. Tell the folks where they can find you on social, and then if you want just a little bit about development, how they can find you and connect to you.
Yeah, so if you want to hit me up on IG, I'm on there when it comes to the socials, Johan Speaks,
Okay.
and then johankhalilian.com. It's not, what I know it's a mouthful, like you said in the beginning.
Yeah.
But you can find me, that's my website. And then I'm mostly on IG. You can see pictures of my kids and things like that because I'm usually showing off with them. Not on X as much,
Okay.
but IG is my place. I got to
Okay.
get more on TikTok. I don't know if you're on TikTok at all,
Yeah,
but
we got a little bit on there. I think you would do really well on there, and we're gonna make sure we tag you and everything. We'll add you as a collaborator when we start to post clips from this episode, and hopefully you can share those two out. This is a great conversation, man, which I think a lot of people are going to benefit from. That mental performance and mental health are not in competition. They work together. They can work seamlessly together and inform one another. And I think that's a really good conversation. I thank you so much, man. I appreciate your time. We got to do this again because I think there's so much more conversation we can have. And besides that offline, I just want to get to know you, man. You guys sound like you have
likewise.
an exciting life, man. Yeah.
All right, my brother.
All right. Peace. Some takeaways. For athletes, pressure doesn't just come from the outside, it comes from within. Expectations from family, culture, and self can be bigger than the game itself. High performers often carry silent pressure no one sees. Success does not automatically equal fulfillment. You can make it and still feel empty. Achievement without identity leads to confusion. You don't have to suffer in silence. A lot of athletes normalize internal struggle, but silence is where things get worse, not better. Your environment shapes your mindset. When you're around others and who you're around matters. Culture, locker rooms, and expectations can either support you or suffocate you. Awareness is the first step to change. You can't fix what you don't acknowledge. Naming what you're feeling is strength, not weakness. For parents, culture and family expectations carry real weight. What feels like motivation can feel like pressure to a young athlete, especially in high achieving or immigrant family systems. Your child needs to feel seen beyond performance, not just for what they do, but who they are. Identity must be bigger than achievement. Check-ins matter more than checklists. Ask how they're doing, not just how they're performing. Emotional awareness starts at home. Normalize conversations about mental health early. If it's not talked about, it becomes hidden. If it's hidden, it becomes heavier. For coaches, you are shaping identity, not just skill. The way you communicate impacts confidence, self-worth, and mental health. Pressure without support creates burnout. High expectations must be matched with relational connection. Create environments where athletes can be honest. If athletes don't feel safe, they won't speak up. And if they don't speak up, you won't see the struggle. Recognize that every athlete carries a different story. Culture, family, personal expectations all matter. Coaching is not one size fits all. As we close today, what stands out in this conversation is that not all pressure looks the same. Some of it is loud, some of it is external, but a lot of it is internal. It's the expectations you carry, the standards you set, the voice in your head that says you have to be more, do more, prove more. And for a lot of athletes, that pressure never turns off. Many athletes report performing at high levels while struggling internally, meaning what you see on the outside often doesn't reflect what's happening underneath. And the reality is, most of them don't talk about it because from the outside, everything looks fine. And that's all that matters to a lot of their ecosystem. They're performing, they're producing, they're succeeding. And that's the disconnect, because performance can hide pain. Success can mask struggle. And if we don't create spaces where athletes can be real, we miss what's actually going on beneath the surface. That's what made this conversation different. Johan didn't just talk about the game, he talked about the weight behind it, the expectations, the identity, the internal battles that don't show up on the stat sheet, and that's where real growth starts. Not when everything is going right, but when you're honest about what's going on inside. Because mental health isn't just about crisis. It's about awareness. It's about understanding. It's about learning how to navigate pressure in ways that don't break you. So whether you're an athlete, a parent, or a coach, here's the question. What are you carrying that no one else can see? And more importantly, do you have a space where you can actually be honest about it? Because strength isn't just pushing through. Strength is being aware enough and secure enough to say, this is where I'm at. And from there, you can actually grow. At CLSI, we talk about closing the resilience gap, the space between looking okay and actually being okay. And conversations like this are how we start to close that gap. Thank you for joining this episode of Beyond the Game, where mental wellness competes. Make sure to follow CLSI on Instagram and TikTok at clsi.life. Share this episode. Engage with the movement. Together, we can close the resilience gap.